We're reimagining democracies where women are able to participate without being threatened to be in jail or to be killed or to be raped or to be harassed. No, so we really are talking about more inclusive, fair, and democracies where we can really enjoy our full human rights.
La Red Feminista por Nicaragua dio a conocer un comunicado.
This is Colmena Fund.
Welcome to Resist, Persist and Reimagine, a new podcast by the Colmena Fund. This is a space for collective stories for women across the global south who are changing what political leadership looks like. In our debut episode, we are honored to speak with Suyen Barahona, Executive Director of Colmena Fund. From prison to exile, from protest to power, her journey lays the foundation for why this fund exists and why it's needed now more than ever.
This is Colmena Fund.
I'm Suyen Barahona. I'm from Nicaragua, Central America, and I am actually currently living in exile in the United States.
For nearly 2 decades, Suyen has been dedicated to defending democracy in Nicaragua. She began in environmental activism, but the return of authoritarianism and the call from women's networks drew her into formal politics. During that time, she and her peers reached a crucial conclusion. To transform politics, more women must hold decision-making power, especially feminist leaders from historically excluded communities. By 2006, it was clear that a new dictatorship was taking shape. When it became reality, so did the persecution. Resist, persist, and reimagine.
I'm a feminist. I've been involved in politics in the last almost 2 decades, and I've been involved in the struggle for democracy in Nicaragua. I've been, I think, politically active almost all of my life. I've been involved in social movements and initially in the environmental movement in my home country and also fighting for rights and democracy. But I got most involved in the political space, I would say, much more heavily in 2006, as I was seeing the initial stages of the possible consolidation of a new dictatorship in my own country. And I was very much convened by women, too. I'm part of the broader women's movement in the country. And I think after kind of long debates too around what needed to be done in that moment, I feel like, we came out with a very important conclusion, which was that it was really important to have belligerent, independent social movements. We need that to strengthen democracies and an active civil society. But there's also a need for more women to be able to occupy formal political spaces if we wanted to move forward agendas and policies that could improve the lives of all citizens, not only of women, but of our communities, of our countries. And at that time also in my home country, there was the threat of the prohibition of therapeutic abortion in the country. And all of that led me to get much more involved, but very much really convened by women, by networks of women, and my interest in that more women become part of the political space. What I foresaw in that moment ended up happening. In Nicaragua, a brutal dictatorship developed and consolidated and started to dismantle democracy in the country. And for that, I have also suffered, persecution, and I was unjustly and arbitrarily imprisoned on 2 occasions. And the last time, after a wave of brutal government repression, I was incarcerated almost for 606 days, kept under conditions of torture, really, and separated from my son. I had a 4.5-year-old son at that time. And I eventually was released with 222 political prisoners. We were released, but we were basically banished and sent to the US. That was kind of the condition of the release. We were deported. And then we were also illegally deprived of our nationality. So my nationality was stripped away. I was erased from the legal registry. All my properties were seized. I don't exist, basically, or at least that's what the dictatorship would like in Nicaragua. And so that's why I'm actually in exile in the US.
After her release and banishment to the United States, a new opportunity arose for Suyen. Now, as Executive Director of Colmena Fund, Suyen leads an initiative dedicated to accelerating the power of women in formal political spaces across the Global South, especially those from the most marginalized communities and experiences.
This is Colmena Fund.
After my release, there was this opportunity of leading a new fund that could also support other women around the world in the Global South. I took that opportunity, and I'm now currently the executive director of this fund, a very nascent fund called the Colmena Fund, and it's really dedicated to accelerating the power of women in formal political spaces across the Global South. We've been very intentional in terms of using the word power in our mission and in our strapline, because we really think that, what we need is to nurture a collective of leaders that have political power to be able to work together, to uplift each other, to ensure that change is inclusive and transformative. And we are also focusing very much on supporting women who are coming from most marginalized experiences, communities, because for us, that's also the way that we can really contribute to an inclusive democracy. And we are, as a fund, we're catalyzing philanthropic support. We feel that there's a need to really support in terms of funding and increase the funding and the collaboration towards women's political leadership. But also we're providing funding to support partner organizations that are nurturing these democratic and human rights value aligned with women's political leadership, and also supporting to strengthen an enabling environment to accelerate the power of women political leaders.
Suyen brings her own political experience to this mission. She's faced the same systemic barriers many women encounter: underfunding, gender bias, violence, and isolation. The fund is guided by women who have walked that path too. Resist, persist, and reimagine.
And of course, this whole lived experience in politics, I've brought that, to this fund, that experience. And I'm very humbled and privileged to be part of an initiative in a fund that's really aiming to support women in the Global South who are dealing with tremendous barriers, And the fund is also, it's comprised of other women, are part of our steering committee, are other women with lived experience in politics who have faced those challenges, the barriers of lack of funding, the barriers of cultural norms that see women differently, and the violence and sometimes the isolation that women political leaders are facing. So I think I bring that lived experience, and those members of the steering committee also who have been former vice presidents or the first Afro-descendant, vice president, for example, in Latin America, the case of Epsi Campbell, or Fumsile Mambo, who is former deputy of president of South Africa and who struggled against apartheid, and Maria Leonor Gerona, also a former vice president of the Philippines, and that directly also has combated, authoritarianism and corruption. So it's a mix of women also who have experience in philanthropy, such as Sumaya Islam or Latanya Map or Binay Fernoroji. And we bring that, I think that's a lived experience, and the empathy and then the understanding of the barriers that women in politics are facing, and that the journey that needs really accompaniment and support from the ecosystem.
Suyen elaborates on the core strategies Colmena Fund is prioritizing: supporting skill building, safety, and shifting the narrative around women in politics.
This is Colmena Fund.
We definitely feel like there's a need to continue supporting initiatives that are strengthening and elevating the technical capacities of women political leaders. That is definitely working. The mentorship and accompaniment and the peer-to-peer learning, we feel like those are also strategies that women think are very effective and very important. Given the heightened context of violence, there's a huge need across regions. That's kind of the number one, barrier that women are facing, is the issue of violence. and harassment and disinformation. So we feel that organizations and initiatives that are really working in supporting and preventing violence, but also supporting kind of the holistic protection of women in politics is very, very important. There's really a big gap. They're very alone in that context that they live, and women are experiencing harassment in their communities, the violence in their communities, digital violence in their political parties, also in the spaces that they exercise that leadership. So we feel that it's important to also play a role of convening, and we've been really trying to do that very intentionally at the fund. There's a need to bring together different sectors across regions too, in order to generate a more enabling environment and to overcome sometimes the silos that we're seeing. So we're being very intentional in that as we also inform our call for proposals and our initiatives. And we feel like there's a real need to change narratives around women's political leadership and the stereotypes that exist, and to amplify really the stories of these women leaders and how, they can be human rights activists, the transformative work that they're doing, the initiatives that are serving whole communities and whole countries. And we feel like there's a need to really elevate those stories so that also more women are able to see themselves in these positions and really be able to see the transformative work that they're carrying out. It's especially, we want to elevate leadership that has been marginalized in many, many countries. We feel that we've heard once and again that there's a need also for flexibility and kind of agile resource mobilization, and that nurturing leadership takes time, and resourcing organizations, and in particular organizations that are led by people from marginalized background, which is what we are doing too, in support of women in politics that are connected to movements and constituents. It's a long-term process, and that you need time and you need more long-term support. So we feel that those strategies are quite important, and we're trying to reflect that also in the calls that we're launching, but also in the partnerships that we're establishing. And we're very excited about that, about the partners who are just making such progress in the face of very oppressive structures. So really supporting organizations nurturing Afro-descendant women leaders or LGBTQ political leaders, young leaders around regions, or creating safe and empowering spaces, to end violence, for example. Those are some of the initiatives that we're excited to continue supporting, because we feel that they're very necessary if we want to really advance women's political leadership.
With political backsliding and fewer resources for gender equality, Suyen shares why this is a moment, though a difficult one, that can spark deeper collaboration and new strategies for change. Resist, persist, and reimagine.
In the midst of crisis, there are always opportunities. And we have to say that, we are in a context of that's very challenging, of backlash, of reversals, of less resources that are being made available towards gender equality and to advance women's leadership. And I think these moments of challenges around the world are also give us a huge opportunity for more collaboration across sectors, and to kind of break away with some of those silos that I was mentioning, and really coming together of like-minded groups and sectors and movements and actual women leaders to strategize on how we can really support to reduce the barriers and really elevate the importance of women entering the political space. I think we've seen, there's a lot of stereotypes, and there's a lot of also discredit towards politics, towards the political space. And the best people sometimes are being left out of this political space. So I think, this current moment of also leadership crisis around the world, it really elevates the need for more women who hold certain values that are really committed to democracy, to human rights, to support them in their leadership journey, and to be able to occupy those spaces and to support them to really deliver on transformative agenda. So I think, this context of crisis is also allowing us to see some of the gaps and to rethink more creatively on how to generate more supportive structures, and also the need for more collaboration among those of us in the ecosystem to really strengthen the work.
Supporting women in politics isn't just about gaining access to power. It's about transforming how power is defined and used. Suyen shares what it means to reimagine leadership, power, and democracy from a feminist perspective.
This is Colmena Fund.
First of all, I think we are in the process of reimagining leadership. We need to reimagine leadership, and we are really about nurturing leadership, feminist leadership that really can also support in transforming power dynamics, so that we can really create countries and communities and societies that are really more just, more democratic. And so when we say that part of the mission is to really accelerate the power, it's because we are talking about transforming power dynamics and thinking about leadership in a different way. A leadership that's inclusive, a leadership that is non-oppressive, a leadership that's really moving forward agendas to transform for equality and for us to all be able to enjoy our human rights, And so I think that's the first thing, it's reimagining leadership, but also reimagining democracy in itself. And that's why we're also very much concentrating in supporting women who are coming from more marginalized backgrounds, because we are seeing, through around the world that in many occasions women are at the forefront, it's struggling for inclusivity and for democracy, for justice, and then they're left aside too. So, we need more of that women's leadership also to be collaborative, to be transparent, to really nurture democracies that are accountable to its citizens, And we're reimagining democracies where women are able to participate without being threatened to be in jail or to be killed or to be raped or to be harassed, Democracy is about people being able to have their human rights be respected. It's about inclusivity. It's about allowing people to thrive socially, culturally, economically. It's about generating spaces for people to be able to be heard, to participate, and to be allowed to be different too, and that celebrates diversity. Democracy is about equality in generating societies that are just and filled with opportunities for all.
What would it look like to support women's leadership at every stage of the journey, not just in moments of crisis, but with long-term, sustained commitment? Suyen offers a powerful call to action for funders and allies alike. Resist, persist, and reimagine.
We really are trying to bring together kind of different sectors and different networks. And we have an important opportunity, I think, right now, those of us in philanthropy, especially to be able to collaborate so that we're not reinventing the wheel, but that we really are connecting in a way that we're filling the different gaps. And I think that's our aim, like really working with others in the ecosystem so that with limited resources, we can attend and assist and really uplift those leaderships that are most marginalized and really also bring resources to areas where maybe there's most need too in this critical time. I think we have the challenge of also thinking more of the long term. Like I said, it's not about just stepping in for the very short term, and especially in thinking about women's political leadership just with very short-term kind of entry point. But there's, I think, what organizations, movements, and the leaders themselves are saying is that, we need support for the different part of the journey. And I think philanthropy can really come together to generate a more enabling environment. I know that some are working on digital violence, some are working on youth, and all of that can come together, human rights, I think we can all come together to really strategize and provide kind of more holistic support than what is being elevated right now. And I think we need to come together to advocate globally too, and in different regional spaces and national spaces on how, if we really are about strengthening human rights and democracy, we need to support women and we need to assure that they are in these decision-making spaces, really pushing forward transformative agendas.
For Suyen, solidarity among women has been a source of strength, even in the most difficult times. Here, she shares the deeper meaning behind the name Colmena Fund and the power of collective leadership.
This is Colmena Fund.
in my darkest, I think, moments and my most challenging moments, the collective of women and the solidarity of women, of my sisters, of my feminist sisters around the world when I was incarcerated, always filled me with strength and hope. And so I think a message is also never to underestimate, that power within yourself, but also the power of solidarity within the collective of women. And so that's why we've intentionally named this fund the Colmena Fund, which in Spanish means hive, because it is about celebrating the power of community of women political leaders. Leadership can be a very isolating and lonely journey, but we really are about nurturing a more of a collective power and collective communities of, women political leaders to be able to support each other along the way.
Throughout this episode, Suyen has shown us that resistance, persistence, and imagination takes courage and community. In this final reflection, she honors the women whose stories shape this podcast series, leaders who are transforming politics through solidarity and collective power. Resist, persist, and reimagine.
Some of the stories and the women that are featured and the partners that are featured in this series have navigated the most challenging context and experience. And they've continued throughout their lives. They've continued in the struggle, and they've opened paths for other women. They've helped to uplift other women. They have been examples of how when we work collectively, we can really also move forward. And, they've navigated racism, violence, discrimination, all the challenges, authoritarianism, dictatorships. And they've continued to come out of all of those experiences and that struggle, remaining hopeful. So I think, there's also so much to learn from them, their strategies to be able to continue persisting, but yet remain optimistic and hopeful in the midst of challenging times. I think these are trailblazers, powerful women from which we can learn, especially in these critical moments around the world, and from which we can really draw inspiration from. When you listen to these stories, I think they will really challenge you to think about transformative leadership, but the power of solidarity, the power of the collective, the power of the hive, and how when we are able to really leverage those networks across the democracy and the feminist movements, and we're able to nurture that collective leadership, we can really transform the world. And I hope that people leave inspired by these voices, by their courage, by their authenticity, and by their struggle.
Thank you so much for listening. If this story resonated with you, there is more to come. Subscribe to Resist, Persist and Reimagine, share it with your community, and stay tuned for the next episodes in this series. Together, we are the Colmena Hive. Join us. Resist, Persist and Reimagine.
La Red Feminista por Nicaragua dio a conocer un comunicado.
This is Colmena Fund.